everybody. Thanks for coming. So this is kind of an interesting experiment. I had reached out to Chris last year about maybe having Ed come, and he was like, "Oh, we're full up. We don't have enough space." But he's like, "Let me get back to you next year." So then he was like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I'm like, "I talk about Sega, I guess." So all of us up here and some folks scattered in the crowd, I won't identify them, used to work for Sega. I started I started September of 1992. That was my, I think it was a Monday or Tuesday, early. And then, Ed, when did you start? 1990.
I don't know what time of day or year, but it was definitely 90.
Okay.
And I started in 93, and again, I don't know exactly the time of year, but I started in 93. One of the first games I was assigned was McDonald Land.
That was a cool game, actually. Treasure. Very good. All right, so let me run through this dumb little deck real quick since I spent like 2 hours on it last night. And then we'll see where this leads us, because I don't really have a final destination in mind. We only have 40 minutes, and I don't know what we can cover. So, but this is about Sega in the 90s. And that's a bunch of Sega logos. And then I did this little thing, which I don't know if you'll hear the sound or not. We are here. So, what was it like? That's the 90s right there. Actually, sorry. No, sorry. This was what the 90s was like. But you meant you wanted to know what it was like at Sega. And that is a horse of a different color. So,
Wait, is that this?
yes. Really, for real. That is a picture of our parking lot in the morning.
Is that Joel's van?
That is Joel's van, yes. This van, we knew the owner. A lot of pot was smoked in this van. In the video when this comes up, you'll see the little blue bug drives up, and that's Steve Bourdais' car. So this was literally a morning on a random day in somewhere in like 93 or 94, I think, when this video was made. This is a YouTube. I'm not going to jump to this yet because this is kind of clunky, and I don't know if I'll break the deck if I do. But there's a whole video. If you look up the name of the video, and I have a slide at the end that will show some resources for this. It's called "This is Sega Test." Watch it. It's like 28 minutes, and it's glorious. But we're not here to just talk about QA. We're here to talk about product development, because we were the product development team at Sega of America, part of it. And then, yeah, I needed that. But I will say this: my perspective as a tester was, there were some times I think when we felt a little bit undervalued, we felt a little bit ignored, but guys like Ed would bestow upon us like value and say, "Hey, you guys are touching these games all the time. You know a lot of these things better than sometimes we do. And worked with us and made us feel like a part of the team." And I just wanted to say how much I appreciated that, because it taught me a lot of not just how to work with people, but to, what's our goal? Our goal is to make the best game we can possibly make. And you never know where that feedback's going to come from, and especially when you have a group of people that are literally playing these games 24/7. That's a good place to start. So thank you for involving us.
Wow.
That was awesome. Yeah.
I remember working with you. Joe was a great tester. All these guys are really good testers, and I guess it makes sense that if you're talking to people about games 30 years later, you were probably really into making games at the time, and I think that's what we all have in common.
100%.
How many games do we all have in common that I produced or designed and you guys tested? Probably 5.
Half a dozen at least, yeah.
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 I mean, well, no, probably more than that. I mean, got to be
And then
12,
my
20.
games are like Ecco the Dolphin, Chakan The Forever Man, X-Men, Spider-Man, X-Men 2, all hard games. many of you young people played games from back in my day, but they were hard. And Joe and Darin, and I can't mention any, Dermot, could kick the shit out of these games. So I kept making them harder and harder and harder. I'm like, Joe keeps getting by. Like, Joe can't get by this.
Yeah.
Here, Joe, test that.
I got a story about that, actually.
And he gets it, so I make it a little harder. So that's why the games are a little on the hard side. It's not my fault.
Yeah, it's all my fault.
That's what I'm implying.
That's my life, actually.
Question? More of a comment. I remember seeing you once say on Twitter along the lines of, there was nothing that made you angrier than kids that would rent a game from the store, beat it in one weekend.
I'm gonna kill those kids.
And then you wouldn't have had to, actually buy the game and help the company run. So you intentionally made Ecco the Dolphin as hard as possible so that you had to buy it and own it.
Maybe overdid it.
I can't think of a single game you made that you could finish in a weekend.
Yeah. I had this weird, it's a game, your participation is not trivial, right? So if it's easy, then it feels like your participation is not as important. And it's, and plus I was a kid when I made those games. Really, in the 20s.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, yeah, they're gonna be hard.
Well, that was the kind of the era, though. No, that was kind of the era, though, right? I mean, it was like, and you didn't get a lot of instructions or, guidance. It was like
just raising difficulty.
Yeah, right.
Until you die.
Yep. And then make it harder again. All right, so I'm gonna just jump back to this. So.
Oh, sorry, did I?
No,
derail it?
not at all. Without. Oh.
Question, were you told by your superiors to make the games more difficult because of Blockbuster video and Hollywood video, so people couldn't finish it in a weekend?
I felt like, man, that is a good question because I don't remember anybody specifically saying that.
Or encouraging,
Yeah, and in fact, I don't even know if anybody was concerned about Blockbuster renting video games and kids being. I was personally concerned about it. But I remember thinking, we all should be concerned about it. We should, and I think all our games are pretty hard as a result of that.
I don't think I can get to this. All right, I thought I could maybe get to the video, but I can't. So, anyway, watch. This is Sega Test. It's crazy. So, yeah, we're all about product development, but back to us. Here's another video, which I'm not going to skip to because also it was that one I was just showing Dermot earlier. They actually had it says a look inside Sega from 1993, and it's literally starts in a test cubicle with 4 people that I recognize instantaneously, like Jason Quo's in a corner. Tony Lynch or Casey Grimm's in a corner, Tony Lynch in another corner, and I can't remember who's in the other corner. But I looked at that and I'm like, that was my life. So, but again, there will be a slide at the end that has all this stuff if you want to check it out. But what's that?
Michael Jackson there too?
No, not in that one. But I was there when
Tell the Michael Jackson story.
The Michael Jackson story?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wait, do you want to hear the Michael Jackson story?
About Moonwalker?
What's that?
Sonic 3, Moonwalker?
So I don't know what he was there for. He was just visiting the office, and they kind of gave us this whole prep, like, don't talk to him. Don't talk to Michael. Don't say anything to him. Don't make him nervous. And so they basically told us, like, you're going to be in your cubes. He's going to come through, and we're going to say, lockdown, right? Like, Michael's here. So I'm sitting in my cube, and all of a sudden, hush comes over the office, right? Michael's here. But he had just busted his ankle. Like, I don't know if he broke it or just twisted it, but there was this whole thing about he had been injured. So he's walking around on crutches. And I'm sitting in my cube, and the best part of this was Mark Dawson didn't give a crap. Because Michael Jackson walks through, and Mark Dawson's, we had a separate area for writing bugs. And Mark Dawson's in there, and he sees Michael's like, got that, I can't quite do Mark Dawson's gravelly voice justice. He's like, hey, Michael, how you doing, man? And like, Michael, oh, I'm good. How you doing? And so he just keeps walking, but he's walking through, and all I can see is this hat kind of like bobbing up and down around the cube wall. And I can't get up because I'm pain of death. I don't want to lose my job. So I'm just watching this hat kind of meander. And then somebody had blocked off the entrance to the cube I was in. And I couldn't see. I'm like trying to. All I saw was his hat. I was like 3 feet away. I was 3 feet away from the man. What?
Was he moonwalking?
He could have been. He could have been.
Moving smoothly?
It was bobbing. It was bobbing. I mean, he was on crutches, so if you can moonwalk on crutches, that would be awesome.
You missed the whole part about Ziggy.
Siggy, what happened with that? I didn't. What don't I know?
Walking through, nobody's supposed to talk to him, and somehow he ends up talking with Ziggy Stangenberg.
Did he really?
This guy who was the biggest stoner in the entire building.
Yeah.
He was like a musician, he did whatever, and somehow they ended up in a conversation for like 5 minutes talking about drums or something.
I did not know that.
That ended and he wandered out.
I didn't remember that at all.
Yeah.
Wow. No, Siggy was awesome. Siggy was like, he and I would battle to see who could come up with the craziest bugs.
Who was it that we unplugged his controller and he didn't know for like hours?
It wasn't Siggy. No, you want to know a good one? This was a good. So there were people would come in the department, and some you knew would make it, and some you knew would not make it. I was in a cube with somebody, and he was playing Soul Feast on the Sega CD. And I'm sitting in a cube and I'm playing, and he's sitting in his cube and he's playing, and he's like, this game's so unresponsive. I'm pressing these buttons. What's happening? Why is this working? And I look over the screen, I could just see flashing in the corner, press start. And I'm like, you're watching the demo right now. And he goes, oh. And then like lunch happened, and he never came back to his cube. He just left. I think he couldn't deal with like understanding that he just like completely did not try. He was just like, why is this not working? This is crazy. Anyway.
The one guy we were talking about, I can't remember which one it was. I didn't remember if it was Ziggy or somebody else, but they had a habit of tipping their chair back and then dozing off. Was it Mike Bench? And we unplugged his controller.
How many?
He woke up and he's like, he had no idea. He was like, just.
How many testers were there? Our peak was 200.
Yeah.
Was over 200, wasn't it?
It was right around.
Yeah, because we had we would run.
Shifts.
We ran through. Well, we ran in the heat. So typically we would have calm times, and then during the holiday season, like right before, I think it was like the lead up to basically the end of November, if you wanted to get something out in time for retail. So we would run. Normally we ran day shift, which was 7 to 3, and night shift, which was 3 to 11. But then there was a graveyard shift that would come on from 11 to 7. During the during the peak times. But that's the thing. We only had so many stations, right? So you had to get people in and out. But I think we had 80 people on a shift basically.
And they were all temps, pretty much.
A lot, yeah. And then some people got hired and got that really cool Sega jacket.
Yeah. This is one of our rewards for becoming a permanent.
Yep.
Earning a permanent status.
That was the big. You knew you made it. But we did call it Sega U for a reason. For a lot of us, this was a second family. And obviously, I'm still friends with these guys 30 plus years on, which is kind of crazy to think about. I was fresh out of high school. I had a summer job after I graduated in 91, and then tried a couple of other things, and nothing really panned out. And then I found out about the job at Sega in 92, and I never looked back. That's been kind of my life. I was 19. And everybody, almost to a person, will tell you it was the best job that they ever had. We met so many people. We got exposed to so much stuff. We got to do things. Michael Jackson, yes. Being sent to with the Rock promotion, they actually sent all of us off to the different but they sent us off to the different Hard Rock cafes to run the events.
No, they didn't send all of us.
Not all of us. Well, yeah, only the people they liked. But they would send us out to the actual, and they're like, hey, show up at this place and run this event. I'm like, nobody prepared me for this at all. Just wing it. Like I'm winging it now. But yes, we are blue to the end. So this is kind of the end of where we're getting, which is the question is, what do you guys want to know? What can we tell you? Ask us anything. It took me, believe me, it took me like 2 hours to do. It's not worth it. And then this is my little. I'm gonna leave this up so you guys can take a picture or whatever. These are the various YouTube videos that I mentioned. This one at the bottom, it says Sega at USA, but it was really STI that was all that was being done at. And they show like, yes, yep, a lot of Roger Hector in that video. This showcase reel was really cool. It's just like it starts with Chakan, which is nice. Inside, this was the one I was talking about where I recognized the cube right away, Rock the Rock, and the Sega test one. That's if you pick any of these to watch, pick that one because you get the most flavor of what it was like to be there. Because even like David Dodge is doing this whole thing back and forth with Steve Apor about the baseball game that they were trying to release or whatever. So
another reason that it was called Sega U is because a lot of the test functions and the way we wrote bugs all came from the whole process came from
Good point.
Sega, and many of us were involved in creating that process. And the way we tested bugs, the way they were put in the bug report, they had to be very specifically written. And several of us were redliners who actually took the bugs and edited them before they, and then they send it back to the tester and they would fix the bugs before they actually were sent to the developers. So there was quite a process behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah.
And that's another big reason why we called it Sega U, because a lot of those processes actually made their way out to other companies outside of Sega. Began using very similar bug speak and at the very beginning, he kind of showed you, he mentioned it early on, we didn't have computers at the desks. We had a VHS tape, the game system, and a TV, and we recorded everything we did. And then we'd have to go and repeat these bugs, and then go in and write them up at a station. It was a computer station where they
like
had
a pen, like a little
pen. They had like 6 or 8 computers in there, I think.
Yep.
And so you had to like take your turn and go in and write the bugs, and then take it to a redliner, and then go back and do it again. So it wasn't until a couple years later the internet came in. We used ICQ. We were doing ICQ for instant messaging, and at that time we started having computers at our desks, and we were able to kind of do everything there. And so it was a pretty drastic change for us going from having like a computer room where we put the bugs in to actually being able to sit at our desks, and that's when we discovered Doom, and everybody was playing Doom on their PCs, networked around the office late at night, and so anyway, that's a little insight into the Sega U.
Yeah, another element. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that. Well, and a lot of people like went all over the industry after Sega too. So like the connections.
So when you graduate Sega U,
yeah,
you get into
Microsoft or EA or Sony. A bunch of people broke off, went to Sony early on. It was crazy. Oh, go for it.
How often do you have to reproduce the bug to write it up?
Depends. If you are only able to recreate it one time, you still got to write it, and you say, once when I did this sequence of events, this thing happened.
closed.
Yeah. But like literally, there were times when we would find bugs. So Darin mentioned recording. That was actually one of the things I was hoping to show here, which I didn't get a picture of, was a test workstation. And to Darin's point, we had our console, we had a VHS recorder, and a TV set. And we recorded everything. So if you ever got a bug to happen and you couldn't figure out really what happened, rewind and watch and go, okay, what was my health meter like? What was happening? Okay, that's weird. Slow it down, frame advance. Nope, still can't figure it out. Okay, rewind it, look again. Can't figure it out. Go back, play, try again. The thing was, one of the really gnarly things about test was, when it was time to release a game, we could use cheats to get to levels and stuff before a game was ready to be launched. But when the final version came in, we had to finish that thing. And if we didn't, we weren't. So, like, I remember, like, Batman and Robin, Adventures of Batman and Robin was happening, And I was one of the few people who could finish that game, and I was running on like no sleep. A new build came in, and Chrissy was desperate to have somebody finish the game. And I got to the last level, and I died, and I was like, ugh, I can't do it. I tapped out. One of the only times I could remember doing that. I think Matt Underwood eventually got it done, but we had to, like, and we knew there was no going back. Like, if we launched a game that had a really bad bug in it, like, we would do revisions, but that was expensive, right? It was expensive to go back and completely remaster a whole cartridge and manual and box and all that. Yeah, exactly. So it was really critical. And that's actually one of the things that's cool about the Trainmentaries. You'll hear Tom Kalinske talk about how important that stuff is. Go for it.
So, kind of want to get your guys' opinion on something. So, like you were saying, when I was a kid in the early 90s, I remember getting a game and it was polished, right? Hardly any bugs. Nowadays, you get games that are released and completely messed up.
Yeah. They don't even work.
Yeah, what do you guys think of that?
That would never have happened at Sega. I mean, certainly not in that era. Now, modern day release, I think you're dealing with other market factors that are going to, cause publishers and developers to have different, thoughts about that.
And different media too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about the physical media.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
nowadays, it doesn't matter if the game releases and has a bunch of bugs because they can update it the next, evening, and
yeah.
all of a sudden they're fixed. Great.
Yeah.
You could not do that back in the 90s with anything.
Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't matter in the sense that you can fix it, but it does matter in the sense that I think from a consumer perspective, right? There was a thought at Sega from internally, like the seal of quality meant something, right? We want to make sure that when this goes out, we can't guarantee the game's going to be great, but at least you should be able to finish it and not like start it up and in 2 seconds have a crash bug that now you can't play anymore.
Well, it was an excellent group of people too. It was a point of pride to have this game
Absolutely.
released in the near perfect state. So you think it was a bunch of stoners just goofing off and playing games, but it wasn't that at all. It was, we had a great time. We made great friendships and stuff like that, but it was work, and it was dedicated work. And you had some serious people that wanted a game to be flawless. And not every game is flawless. As he said, close that bug, and it might be a glitch or it might be something that somebody might find in, 200 tries or whatever, and they make that call when they're getting ready to release it. That's not going to really be a problem. But something that stops the game, or you fall through a wall, or you're glitching all over the place, those are going to get fixed.
Yeah.
So we did have some frustrations with some producers. They come back to the lead tester and say, we're not going to fix that. I don't care how passionate you are about it. Move on. So that's kind of a testament that the people were extremely dedicated to the quality of these games, the testers and everyone above them. And yes, go ahead.
Was your guys' position very competitive? I think that's the word.
It could be. Yeah.
That jacket should tell you something. Yes. Because and competitive in the sense that like you wanted to make it and you didn't have a lot of time because. And this actually was real bad later when we had there was a, what do they call it? Black Monday? When a whole bunch of people got let go because there was so you had a certain amount of time you could be a temp, which was about 6 months. And at some point, some folks looked the other way when they weren't supposed to, and some people had been on contract for way longer than that, and they had to be either hired or let go, and we lost a bunch of people in one day. But I actually went through the process of being a temp for 6 months, and then I was hired on a program called Sega Temp, and I was on Sega Temp. I think you could be on Sega Temp for like a year, and I was on Sega Temp for 7 months, and then I got hired fully permanently. And it was funny because it's like you're hired at a salary, but your salary is still hourly, so everything was still running on hours. But it was like I wouldn't say it was cutthroat. Exactly.
But it was very competitive.
Yeah. You wanted to stand out.
Out of those 200 people we had at our peak, there was maybe a dozen permanent testers.
Yeah.
And everybody else was a temp.
Right.
And everybody wanted to get those permanent testers.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just for the jacket, but just because you knew it was hard. It was hard to stand out and function in a way that would separate you from that many more people in the pond, right? I mean, what?
And then we can catch somebody like his eye.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he'd give us a better job than working at
Throw you a bone.
Yeah, exactly. No, I for real. Like, I think there was some shine, right, that you could get from, I felt fortunate that I had a good I had a good relationship with you and some of the other producers, but like, not everybody got to do that, right? And if you did, and people took notice, like, I got to tell you, I feel like I probably should have been fired earlier on. Like, I didn't know we had no guide, right? When I started, there was no guide. So Steve Apor hired me, and the first day I'm testing X Mutants, I'm finding bugs, and I'm like leaving my station and going to Steve's cube, at really loudly, like, "Hey, Steve, I just found a bug," and he's like, "Cool." And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and look for some more. And then I found another bug. Hey, I found a crash. Okay, well, you should go write that. Oh, how does that work? Like, literally, no guidelines. So later on, Greg Fleming wrote the Tester's Bible. And that is a document that exists. All this stuff, there's a crazy amount of this stuff that actually still exists. I have copies of some of it myself. If you guys want to come by where we're sitting, and I can physically show you, like, redlining guidelines, all sorts of paperwork. But this stuff lived on, and that's how I think that passed to other places too, because we all knew it, but we had it documented, and it was like important, and it mattered, and that was, I think, what made it professional, right? Because it could have just been some group of dummies and trying stuff, but we actually really had process, and it was like amazing to think about how much time was dedicated toward just quality control. Not even outside of the games and everything. It was a lot. And I appreciated that you guys, appreciated us. Because, again, Test felt like we were very quick. It felt like we were quick to get blamed when something happened and not really quick to get a lot of praise when things didn't happen. So, did I see a hand raised? Oh, go for it.
I'm an amateur game developer. Thanks.
He means that.
Before starting working on my own games, I'd see bugs and it'd be like, how did that ever get past the developer? And now that I'm actually making my own game, I see that there's like millions of working parts, and I realize, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like, for one game, I remember they fixed a bug where they said, like, made the enemy turret no longer invisible if the player using the turret had the army skin, and the person that it was invisible for was using the French announcer pack on the 3v3 level map. And it's like a joke because it's like, all these different things together. It's like, how does that even happen? But when I see it, I'm like, sure, why not? Yeah. So my question is, what's the funniest bug you've come across with like the millions of moving parts?
Man,
Let me ask you guys this, and I think I remember the answer, but what was the longest bug
that's.
you ever came up with? The most number of steps?
Oh, my
I
God.
remember
That would be
that.
funniest.
Pretty much, yeah.
I remember seeing a bug report that had a bug that spanned like multiple pages,
Yeah.
but I don't
If I remember rightly, I think it was 27.
really.
27 separate steps.
Do you know what game this was?
Oh, I
Okay.
35 years ago, man.
But no. I know my favorite bug. To answer your question, there was I don't think it ever got released, but there was an Indiana Jones game for the Genesis, and then it was being developed on the Sega CD. And I'm playing in my cube, and I've got the Model 1 Genesis and Model 1 Sega CD. And as I'm playing through the level, the game's kind of slowing down. The whip thing in that game was kind of cranky, and it made, there was a lot of math that was happening. I'm jumping around the level, and in the middle of playing the game, the CD tray ejected. Flat out, just, I'm like, I didn't press a button. This is not supposed to be happening right now. What did I just do? That game was tragically buggy, and I don't think it ever released. But that was I was like, I didn't expect that. And then I was like, what would have happened if I was playing on like a Model 2 or a CDX? Then what would it have done? But one of the things that we did have, and I think I'd probably know why it happened. It hit some address it wasn't supposed to hit. We actually and I swear to God, this is my holy grail of game. If anybody finds one of these, bring it to me. I will pay you whatever you want for it. We had a thing called an address checker. So the address checker, you had your ROM in there, And as you're playing, developers had to avoid writing to certain parts of memory because that was restricted. And so if you did, you'd get an error on the address. The game would freeze. You get an error. You read the code, write the code. Press a button to advance to the next step. Read the code, write the code. So you could have address checker bugs that were like this long. You had to write the entire sequence. And that was one of those things that, like, I think a lot of like hidden stuff that, you know, would have passed and caused problems later got caught just because of address checker stuff. Now, if you want to talk to somebody about getting around the system, this guy right here, you have so many like firsts on that, right? Like colored Sega logo.
Blood red.
Yeah, with the sound effect, right? We had the Sega standards checklist. All these things. Every Sega game should do these things. You broke standards all the time. And I think, what was the other one?
They're there for.
What was the other one you told me about that was different? Clone Wars, right? Starts out, there's not even a Sega logo. It just jumps into the game. Look at this guy coming up with stuff.
That's Sega of Japan. You are not to avoid the Sega logo or legal text. So?
I still think the coolest puzzle I've ever seen in any game is X-Men.
X-Men 1.
The reset the computer. Yeah. If you don't
That's
know,
before the internet.
yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know that you're playing, X-Men game, you go through a bunch of levels, you get to one part where you're supposedly in this simulation and you're fighting the bad guy in this level. Yeah, that's the game. X-Men 2, right? Yeah.
No, it was the first one, was it?
First game.
First one.
Okay.
Yeah.
The prequel to that.
Yep.
You're fighting the bad guy, and there's this big screen up at the top of the screen, and the voice, like Cyclops, keeps saying,
Xavier.
reset the computer. Xavier keeps telling you,
Yeah.
reset the computer,
Reset
the
now,
computer.
reset.
And you're jumping around, you're fighting the guy, you're smashing the screen.
You're
it
looking for
disappears, nothing
anything.
happens. The way you have to do it is you hit the damn reset button on the Genesis. And that takes you into the next
That
part of the game.
that broke me. That broke me when I found out. We were at a focus test. You and whoever the developer of that, Bert, was it Bert? We're sitting there and I'm like, I've never figured this out. I sat there I've been on the screen 4 different times and sat there and just died. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, he's telling you, reset the computer. I'm like, what are you talking about? Reset? I just find the reset button. I'm like, oh my God. And like my head just went on spot.
I just want to comment about the X-Men thing real quick. So I remember playing that game with my cousin. We rented it from Blockbuster. But
Yep.
we got that far and we pushed reset and the game completely reset. And I found out later that you had to just barely tap the reset.
Oh, like you press and hold it
Tap
type?
Yeah, if you
Oh.
do a full reset, it will reset the game.
Did you have a question?
No, that's what happened, I swear.
That was a bug. We missed it.
Okay. Well, couldn't test it that much.
Yeah.
We have-
Who the hell knows
In the
how
back?
it reacts if it's like a later version of the...
Oh, yeah. Different model, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Super cool you guys talking about like bugs, especially on the Genesis. I'm curious to know what do you think about like the Game Genie when it came out? Like how did that influence your opinion about unintended, I don't know,
I hated it
video game? Yeah, and did it change how you think? Like what did you think when the Game Genie came out and like if that was a bug, intentional, like what are your thoughts?
I felt like it was a crime that someone make a device to extract more fun out of my game. And it's just like, wait a minute. Like, and if the kids wanted to change the extra lives, like, why did they tell me? I'll put it in the menu instead of these but I was, like I said, a kid when I was
I feel like it might be a different perspective from a developer versus a tester because, like, we didn't really, like, peripheral, like, we did have to test some, like, third-party peripheral stuff, but, like, anything to do with, like, a Game Genie, like, you're doing something with the game that we can't control, so we're not going to, like, lose any sleep over it if you, create some crazy crash bug or something because, we can't stop you.
Yeah, as far as we were concerned, I don't think the Game Genie existed.
Yeah,
That's out of our control completely. Whatever the hell you want to do with that.
Yeah, but we did end up having to do a lot of crazy stuff later. Like, I mean, some stuff not necessarily something you would have enabled by a device like that. But as an example, we had this special controller for when we would test games that had the D-pad removed, and you had to press left and right at the same time and up and down at the same time on every screen to make sure the game didn't crash, because there was a Taz game, and the Taz game, somebody was playing with a D-pad that was real loose, and they crashed the game. And we were like, how did it crash? We couldn't figure it out. And then somebody was like, hey, this D-pad's kind of weird. And somebody's like, oh, well, it's pressing both directions at the same time. That's causing the confusion. So we literally had to now have a special controller for every single game from that day forward to check the double button presses.
And if you're not familiar with Taz, it's Tasmanian Devil. But
it was just weird stuff like that. And then there is even, like, in the documentation I was talking about, there's even a section that talks about every revision of Genesis and every revision of the Sega CD and making sure that we cross all of these off the mark, right? And there were known issues with some of them, but you've got to make sure everything works with every piece of hardware. And if there's one game, there's one system that doesn't work right, somebody's going to have to do something about that, because you don't want to, have to put another thing on a box that says incompatible with whatever.
One of the weirdest tests I was ever involved in was with Eternal Champions and the Activator. I don't know if you're familiar with the Sega Activator, but yeah, I was involved in testing that.
Oh,
we went to
man.
a separate room and
Yeah.
we were doing the whole thing like this, trying to fight the Eternal Champions. That's one of the weirdest tests. I've
Junio
ever
told a
been
story about
involved in.
sweating it out in that room, man, because he worked day shift and he had to be in a room where the sun was like beaming in on him. Go ahead.
Did you guys work in that weird era between like consoles and the internet? I think it was like the Dreamcast had like the 56K modem in it. That was like my first Silicon Valley job, was like supporting that network way back in the day.
Oh, okay.
It was a nightmare, but I was just curious, like, how did you test that?
I was gone at that point, but Dermot
I
was.
was gonna ask, it was kind of the end of like '97.
You were.
Yeah, I left in '97. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I
wasn't
left
involved.
soon after Dreamcast launched, and we didn't really, there wasn't really anything going on with the network functionality.
We had the Sega channel, remember?
Yeah.
Wasn't that a network?
That was over the phone though, I think.
Now it's even before Dreamcast, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Still, actually, that was like Sega.
So
Saturn.
no.
It was for the Saturn, I think, but what was like the spin-off that they had that was like, okay, they're gonna do the network games.
Oh. Rollins went over there. Sega Soft.
Sega Saturn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that became like a separate thing.
Yeah. I've heard, so Lance was at Sega during that kind of Dreamcast era, and I've heard him talk a little bit about, because he was working on, our friend Lance Nelson, he was involved with the Sega.com stuff, there's still some crossover with some of the Dreamcast stuff, I guess. Actually, I don't know if you guys have heard of this game. It was rumored for a long time. Nobody ever found it. My friend Lance has a copy of it. I have seen it, and I actually posted a video of it. It's called Far Nation, and it does exist. It is real, and that was a game that he was telling me about when they were testing, when they got it in the department. It wasn't really for them to like fully go through and test the game, but just to make sure all the network functionality actually worked. So at some level, like, the split of responsibility for testing kind of was between, in some cases was between the developer. They had to be responsible for the game content, and then Sega was responsible for making sure the network stuff worked a certain way. They weren't necessarily going to go through and test everybody's, MMO or whatever it might be. So, one in the back.
What do you guys think of the 32X?
Hey! Rumor has it he was in the room when that was being discussed.
He did it? I keep saying I didn't like things now. I don't know why I'm getting into this. Because Genesis was like a big hit. You just beat the crap out of Nintendo. We're on top of the world. And the Sega Saturn was coming. But everybody would stop buying Genesis games and start buying Sega Saturn. So there was going to be a valley in between these two humps. So they came up Saturn, which was, I wanted all my games to go on the Saturn. I didn't want to do any games with 32X. But Joe Miller, who was really our boss at the time, he's passed away recently, God rest his soul, but he really is the guy who brought 32X into existence, and he's the one who drew that little chart, a bridge between the two humps, and convinced everybody that 32X was it. He convinced me to make one game. He wanted Ecco to be on there. I was like, no way is it going to be on Ecco, because I wanted Ecco to be on Saturn. So I came up with the Hummingbird games. Colibri with a K is my game. It's my only 32X game. And when we made that game, I just loved the 32X because it was like the Genesis, everything that was great about the Genesis, except a whole other sprawling playing field at 8 bits per pixel. So it was just, oh my God, this thing is the best. So I only made one game, regretfully, and then it went away, and then the crappy Sega Saturn came. And so I regret I should have made Ecco for the 32X. It was a great platform, but good old Joe Miller.
But ultimately, it was just a cash grab.
It was just like a stopgap.
Yeah.
Or like
It was an
a
afterthought.
throwaway platform.
Yeah.
But it needed a debugger, and it needed its own programming environment, and it needed its own support team, and it needed all its own standards and all this shit. You can't just do quick little versions and then at the same time make the Saturn. You.
Yes, the game that I'm making is in Unity, and my experience before that was level editors, video games that already exist, and they're like, make your own levels, like you can put landmines here, tanks there, and helicopters there. So with Unity, it's kind of half and half. There's background coding, but there's also placing objects where you want them to be. In the 90s, what was programming games like? Did you make a level editor for the games and put Ecco here, put the air gaps here, the shard here? Or did you actually have to manually hundreds of thousands of lines of code?
Simple tools like dpaint or tile editors that the developers made so that you could select big chunks of tiles.
Yeah.
Stamp to make the scrolling play fields.
Yeah, but
then,
that was all custom though, right? I mean, there wasn't like there was like a dev kit.
Yeah, each
Not back then.
developer would make their own
Yeah.
set of tools,
Yeah, yeah.
level editors, whatever. Nobody likes typing in, so as soon as it's like you type one thing in, then 20 things in, it's like, I'm gonna make a tool. So then the developer will make a tool underneath tools. So I think Unity started as one of these little tile editors, right? And it just turned into what it is today. I'm bullish on Unity. I like it.
We're on time? We're out of time? Okay. One more question? We got one more question.
Yeah, what was your lament with the Saturn? Because it was difficult to program multiple processors.
Two Hitachi CPUs. They're rice cooker CPUs, but there are two of them. They're a pain in the neck to get them to talk to each other. Also, the GPU wasn't 3D. It kind of was 3D. All it would really do is take a polygon and skew it. So instead of making the polygon do something like that, it would just bend it. And that's why all the 3D stuff always looked bendy and blurry. It's crappy. So and then I realized, it's really a 2D platform, but it's a good 2D platform. If you know the game Three Dirty Dwarves, this is my Saturn game that was made to be the Saturn game. You know the game? Yeah. So that it was designed for that GPU instead of like the game like Mr. Bones, where we designed it, started to make it. It's like, this thing can't handle the truth. The problem with people like me is I have these dreams that I see, and then 8-bit, and it's like it's just never the way. But these days, games with dudes like you using Unity, it's like, hey, that looks pretty good. And it only took a day or two. It would take a year just to make little jumping guy. Much better time. Anybody gonna be a game developer? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you're my people. The rest of you, good luck. Who hates AI?
has its moments. It has its moments. That's what I'll say. Thanks, everybody. If you have any other questions and you want to see anything else, please come see us over on the against the wall up there.